সবাইকে শুভ সন্ধ্যা জানাচ্ছি। আমার নাম এস এম মাসুম বিল্লাহ। এলকপ স্টুডিও থেকে সবাইকে স্বাগত। আমরা প্রতি সপ্তাহে একটা অনুষ্ঠান করছি। অনুষ্ঠানটির নাম দিয়েছি স্বপ্ন দেখে বাংলাদেশ। আপনারা জানেন যে এলকপ কাজ করে মানুষের আইনি ক্ষমতায়ন নিয়ে, তারপরে গণতন্ত্র নিয়ে এবং মানবাধিকার নিয়ে। So we are holding this, weekly program, which is named as স্বপ্ন দেখে Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a dream. And this evening we have a very special guest to conversate with. We have got Professor Dr. Mark Jackson of Bristol University. Mark, can you hear me? And welcome to my show.
I can hear you. I can hear you. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much. For the audience, let me inform you that Professor Dr. Mark Jackson is the Associate Professor in Human Geography. He likes to introduce himself as a human geographer, right? And he has taught at the University of Alberta, as well as now at the moment he is Associate Professor in Human Geography at the School of Geographical Sciences at University of Bristol. And Professor Mark is currently visiting Bangladesh. He's in Dhaka now, and he has been to Elkop studio this evening to talk with us about human rights, democracy, and the current political situation in Bangladesh. So Mark, please accept our heartiest felicitations and gratitude for giving us time this evening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Now, let me ask a very simple question. Is this the first visit your first visit to Bangladesh?
It is. It is my first visit to Bangladesh. I was invited by ELCOP to come for some training prior to being potentially an election observer in the election in January. So I was invited to come. This is my first visit to Bangladesh. I have some experience with Bengal, the wider Bengal, and the history of Bengal and Bengal modernity, as I did my PhD on the city of Calcutta and the colonial history of the city of Calcutta.
I didn't know that.
And so I lived in Calcutta for 2 years in the early 2000s doing fieldwork and archival research, and that constituted the grounds for my PhD.
What was your area of research?
Well, what I was interested in doing is typically within the stories of urban modernity and how we think about urban cities, often Eurocentric discourses around European cities as the models for how we imagine what it is to be a modern city are used as examples and as models in the narratives and the discourses. And what I was interested in doing was actually arguing that Calcutta is an example an archetypal example of a modern city. And so I went and I did fieldwork there on its history and on the way in which the imaginary of Calcutta was central to articulating an urban imaginary of modernity that was central to fixing concepts of modern cities in comparative perspective. And so it was around a post-colonial theory of urban modernity that took me to study Calcutta for my PhD.
Can I know what made you motivated and interested to do work in Calcutta or in Bengal?
Well, actually, that's a family story. My father, who was older than me, quite a bit older than me when I was born, was a soldier for the British Army in World War II. And he fought in Burma and parts of Bangladesh then against the Japanese. And he had been stationed in Calcutta as part of that war effort. And so, more importantly than that, India and South Asian imaginaries were a part of my family life. And so I visited India a few times prior to doing my PhD. And it was in actually being asked to do a book review of Walter Benjamin's Arcades Project, a very famous project, a very famous book that was published in English in 2000 by the German theorist and philosopher and literary critic Walter Benjamin. And his book was about Paris and the way in which Paris represents modernity. And the ruins of Paris represent modernity. And actually, I was walking across a bridge in the city where I lived in Western Canada, in Edmonton, and it was like this bolt of inspiration. I thought, why couldn't I do an arcades project in Calcutta? And so I pitched that idea to my professor, and he thought, oh, that's a great idea. Off you go. And so that's how I ended up in Calcutta.
Oh, excellent. It's nice to know this story. For my audience, let me inform you that Professor Mark Johnson has worked on post-coloniality, post-colonial hegemony, political economy, cultural geography, etc. Now, Mark, you have been here for a couple of days in Dhaka. Is there anything particular you want to share with the audience that has attracted your attention?
Well, actually, I would think some of the things that have attracted my attention have been the enormous hospitality of the people, the warmth of the people, and the warmth of my welcome here. That's been particularly welcome. I've experienced the ways in which the city reminded me much of when I lived in Calcutta. But perhaps amplified. As I said to a friend this morning, Dhaka is a bit like Calcutta on steroids. And so, of course, it's the experience of modernity within the city, but also the experience of the infrastructural developments that are a part of the city and the way in which they're shaping the urban landscape. But I think the other thing that I'm here as invited to potentially be an election observer. And in our conversations with people here, one of the things that's being impressed upon us is to get a feeling for the upcoming, or how people are feeling now about the election. And I think one thing that I have observed, and I've talked about this already on my visit here, is a feeling of unease, is a feeling of disquiet, a feeling of worry and concern about the upcoming election in January, and the fact that the country is at a vital juncture, is in a really important place, politically, socially, economically, and this election, there is a lot at stake in this election, and there's a concern for the future. There's a concern for the legacies of the past, shaping how this election is understood. And so I do feel, as I think with my colleagues who are also visiting, I do feel that sense of perhaps anxiety, concern, and real, a real worry perhaps about the upcoming election and its implications for stability and peace and the ability of people to exercise their right to vote.
Right, can't agree more, because I also share the same feelings as the election process. Certainly, the citizens of the country have become a bit worried about what will happen. But Mark, as you have raised the issue of election, I mean, it is a challenge for the developing democracy to hold a free, fair, and neutral and participatory election. That has been also the case elsewhere in the developing jurisdictions. Now we have this history, colonial history of 200 years with England, and then with Pakistan for 24 years. Then again, in the last 50 years, we have seen the military ruling and extra constitutional regimes in Bangladesh as well. So it is very natural that we'll be struggling with the electoral process as well. Now, what are the obstacles do you see that Bangladesh will face in the upcoming days in order to hold the upcoming election free and fair manner? What are the challenges for Bangladesh? Because we see there has been a growing interest of international community monitored the Bangladesh election.
Yeah. So prior to coming, in the week prior to coming, I read reports in the newspapers about violence in the streets and unrest and the police using dispersal tactics like rubber bullets and water cannons. And so and that was in the newspapers and on online media, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, and other outlets in the UK. So people are starting to pay attention to what's happening here. And they're paying attention within the context of the story of the political impasse between the two main parties and the political impasse around the Constitution and the neutral government that might be called upon to usher in what's perceived to be a free and fair and hopefully violence-free election. And so those concerns are ones that I was aware of because it's part of the media and it's part of the story outside Bangladesh. I think one of the other things, well, what are the obstacles? I guess one thing that I want to be quite clear about is in being invited as an observer from the UK, and I'm originally from Canada, that I'm well aware of my position, if you like, in speaking about these matters. And I think it's important for foreign observers and foreign nationals coming who are looking in and watching and perhaps offering advice is not to take a paternalistic approach to the elections here and the political process here. I think it would be deeply unjust for foreign observers to come in and to tell people here how to run their elections, how to run their country. The legacies of colonialism are such that have proven that to be repeated disasters for centuries. And I think repeating that kind of arrogance and hubris is a fault. And so I don't want to be perceived in that way. And I don't want to come in and tell people I'm not an elections expert. I don't want to tell people how to run their democratic process or how to solve the problem of the political constitution or what might be necessary. Because I think it's also important to note that the question of violence, the question of free and fair elections are not peculiar to nations in South Asia. These are problems and features of all elections around the world. The contemporary context in the United States of America is one where questions of free and fair elections have emerged repeatedly, excuse me, have appeared repeatedly over elections for many years. The current ex-president of the United States is on trial for fomenting violence after the election.
So even the American electoral process is not out of question.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's important that we not sort of take an assumption that we assume as foreign observers from Europe that our elections are necessarily always free and fair and perhaps violence free, and that countries in the global South just need to listen to us. That's a paternalistic approach that's not helpful. So part of my observation, I think, is about perhaps as somebody coming, I'm not a representative of my university and I'm not a representative of my country, a formal representative of my country, but I'm somebody who's come as a university intellectual, as an academic, as somebody who upholds the values of democracy and freedom and transparency and, of course, nonviolence. And to encourage and uphold those values and to communicate the strength of those values as much as if I was an observer going to the United States or as an observer going to France or another country where observations always happen, to encourage there as well the principles and the values of free and fair and violence-free elections and the abilities of all people to cast their votes. And the way and to pay attention to the structural formations that are a part of all elections where people engage in forms of electioneering or intimidation or misinformation online or various forums to sway and dissuade or to prevent people from voting, and to suggest that those actually are not helpful things for democracies. They're not helpful things for economies. They're not helpful things for social cohesion. And to stand with people in Bangladesh, we had a meeting this morning in a hotel with lots of civil society members, which I thought was an excellent opportunity for groups of civil society to stand together with representatives from outside the country and to say, we want free and fair and violence-free elections that uphold the values of democracy that are cherished here in Bangladesh as much as they're cherished in India or in France or in all democratic societies. And so my observation would be one of standing with, in solidarity with people who are keen to uphold those values here, and to help as much as I can in your efforts here to have fair elections that are violence-free and that respect people's right to vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Jackson, now, look, this democracy, human rights, standard, those are very abstract terminologies. And being an academic, can you say what should be the exact criteria to hold that such election has been free, fair, and neutral or acceptable, or has been according to the standard? Can we precisely define this term free, fair, and acceptable election?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we could have a universal definition that would apply to all countries in all contexts in the same kind of way. I think each election and each representative democracy is going to have different processes and different means of representation. Some might have first past the post. Some might have proportional representation. Some might have specific differences around who's able to vote when and where and how. For instance, Bangladesh doesn't have postal votes, whereas that is a part of American elections and other elections. So each context is quite different, and each of those is going to have specific kinds of demands on voters around what they're able to do and how, etc. I think there might be one simple test, and that's to ask the people who voted, did you feel that you were freely able to vote? Did you feel that you were freely able to cast your ballot how you wanted, and feel that your safety was respected? Were you intimidated? Were you threatened? If not, did you feel the process is fair to you and representative to you? And if we can ask that of different constituencies around the country, whether it's a poor woman in the farms of northern Bangladesh or an elite professor in the center of the Dhaka, if we can ask all of these different people and have results that say, yes, I felt fair, and on the most part, we feel that there isn't.
Right. Dr. Jackson, Bangladesh is ready to welcome international observers in the election. So to what extent do you think that inviting the international observers will ensure the standard, will enhance the standard of the election?
Well, I think it will. I think observation is a part of all elections and should continue for all elections. And I would hope that, for instance, Bangladeshis are welcome to come and observe elections in the UK as much as vice versa. I think it does, and I think there's a certain kind of accountability that we share in being open and transparent about our processes, in allowing others who are not part of the election system, who are not a part of the system, to come in and cast a view in the same way that we have external and neutral referees in a football match, or referees, umpires in cricket. So So it's not as though we're the ones who are telling you that it's free and fair. But I think
True.
a presence of people who aren't interested in the process, in the sense of wanting one party or another, etc., who are neutral within the process and can be observed as neutral and can be welcomed in and be a part of the process. I think those are important features, vital features of all elections around the world.
I think, Dr. Jackson, this is also a matter of practice and also depends upon political culture that being a ruling party, to what extent you are accountable to the people to give a free, fair election. Also, as a post-colonialist theoretician, you are aware that we have this dilemma, right? Under the ruling party, there are some challenges. Under the caretaker system, that also does not go to the accepted postulates of parliamentary democracy. But ultimately, we'll have to force a formula where people can vote, where people can participate, where people feel that they should vote without any kind of intimidation. Am I right?
I think absolutely you're right. Absolutely you're right. Couldn't agree more.
Dr. Jackson, I'm running out of time. One last question to you that, I mean, first, thank you very much for giving us this time. One last words or comments from your part. That what should be your suggestion for the future days to come, because election is supposed to take place in December or January. I'm sure that you will love to come to Bangladesh again as an election observer. What would be your last one-sentence suggestion for Bangladesh?
Well, I think to uphold a process that places the values of the country and the social goods and the human rights of the country at the forefront of the election, and to find a way through the political impasse. There's always going to be a political impasse in any parliamentary democracy between between different parties, and we're never going to have a simple system. But that's also part of the democratic process, which is about dialogue and communication and openness and transparency, where the values of the democratic and the political process are not about upholding power for an elite or gaining power for those who would use it to their advantage, but in the benefits for the social good of everybody in the country, and to uphold the social cohesion of the nation, and to provide for the rights of those from the lowest level to the highest level to exercise their franchise within the country in a transparent and democratic way, because the point of the politics is to provide for the social good of all, rather than for the narrow and selfish interests of a few. And if the political process can be oriented around those values, then I think, and responsive to those values, then I think it's probably doing the best it can with its dialogue. But if it's about holding on to power or seeking to come into power for the benefits of a few, then and it's not doing its political job. And we see that around the world in all kinds of elections. It's not unique to Bangladesh or the potential challenges in Bangladesh. It's a problem an increasing problem in globally with many democratic elections. So it's a part of a wider global phenomenon. I think perhaps some of the struggles here, but ones that we need to constantly reiterate, returning to the social goods of all and the social provisions and the freedoms and rights and values of all, rather than of a few.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for your good words. And social good and values should be the ultimate objectives of politics. Professor Dr. Jackson, thank you very much for joining with ELCOP this evening. Please accept our gratitude.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. Darshok, Amra Professor Dr. Mark Jackson, Bristol University Professor, post-colonial theorist-এর অন্যতম পুরোধা, তার সঙ্গে কথা বলছিলাম বাংলাদেশের সমসাময়িক পরিস্থিতি নিয়ে। আবারও হাজির হব অন্য কোনো অতিথি নিয়ে। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। সবাইকে শুভেচ্ছা জানিয়ে বিদায় গ্রহণ করছি। আল্লাহ হাফেজ।